It's an honor to interview my mother, and if you know my mother, then you know that my mother is Ambassador Quao. One of the things that I remember interview 3 years ago, which went viral, I don't know if you remember, it was during COVID, yes. And we did it online, and the questions and the passion of people wanting to join ADDI. How are you seeing the conversations that you've had 3 years ago now? Are you seeing more people being more passionate about the continent? Are you seeing more diasporans coming back home? What are you seeing, Mummy, and how is ADDI faring?
First and foremost, I just want to thank you for the wonderful work that you continue to do. Yes, indeed, I remember our interview 3 years ago. I think it was around the time that the Chinese were really mistreating Africans, yes, because of COVID, and it really sparked the conversation. And you've continued to really hit it off the park with conversations that are very stimulating, conversations that are so needed, especially at this time in our history. Is to answer a question about what change have I seen since our last interview 3 years ago. The awakening. There is something in the air. If I were to take it to the biblical times, where the Bible says those who are at the top shall be at the bottom, those who are at the bottom shall be at the top. I truly believe we're going through those times. Even the axis of the earth, the negative and positive axis, there's a shift that's taking place, and it's inevitable. I am on a lot of platforms. People put me on their platforms, and I just stay there and just following the conversations. It's amazing. Just the change in the tone, and the people are challenging themselves, and they're discussing issues, and the spirit of Pan-Africanism, and people just, you get this sense that people are proud to be African. That didn't used to be the case 10 years ago. People wanted to run away from being African, but I see more and more appreciation for what it means to be an African. And more importantly, with me having lived in the United States, and I see more and more African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans who are now interested in identifying themselves with Africa. We brought the African diaspora here 2 years ago, and I am amazed at the number of people who have actually come back, started businesses, and some are living here, yes, and some have even found husbands.
Yes, yes, yes.
So there is something in the air. There is something vibrant about being African. And then when you come to the cities, I've visited many African cities, there's a certain level of vibrancy and pride in being African. Yes, you still run into some people who still want to go abroad, looking for greener pastures, but by and large, there's an increasing significant percentage of people who also realize that the diamonds that they're looking for, the greener pastures they're looking for, are right here at home. So there is that change, and it's palpable, it's visible, and it's everywhere. For me, as an elder African, I find it very refreshing. Something else that I'm noticing is the spirit of entrepreneurship. Lots of young people like you who are just fearless, and you are going out there and you know the world is yours to conquer. That fearlessness, in spite of going against all odds. It's not easy being a young person trying to make it in this world. It's very expensive. Everything is expensive. You gotta have a little backup to really get started. But I still find, in spite of not having the finances to back you up, that is not stopping the average black person, be it a black person in America, in the Caribbean, in Europe, but more importantly, on the African continent. The spirit of entrepreneurship is alive and well, and it's palpable. Again, very refreshing. And as an elder, I can't help but feel very inspired to do my part in whatever way to support the youth, not only the youth in Africa, but the youth around, especially black youth. I like to say, as a mother, as a grandmother, and I know it's going to happen. I often joke with my VP, and I would say, you know, I just see it happening. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, little white girls and little white boys are going to wish they could be African. They're going to wish they could be black. There's something in the air that's reminding black people that you are the origin of humanity, and that what you have, the black skin, the pigment, is that sign and symbol of originality. And it gives us the authenticity that we have, something that, and I may be looked at as a racist, but I'm not, but it is really a fact, that we have a certain resilience, there's a certain indestructibleness about us that can only be found in the original thing. And us being the original people, all of it is exemplified in who we are as a people. Our people are beginning to appreciate that and are beginning to stand up tall and be proud of it. But when you see it happening in your children and your grandchildren, you can actually sit back and say, yes, I did it. Somehow they're finally hearing me. And when I tell them you are it, you are the McCoy, you are the original mothers and fathers of humanity, stand up on the tallest pedestal and tell the world who you are.
What happened in your journey that made you become so passionate about the continent? Because sometimes, I mean, I'm passionate about the continent, but sometimes you just get frustrated at circumstances and you think, why is this happening? Like, are people really doing this? What has continued for you to be still passionate, still advocating, still promoting the continent and this Pan-Africanism? What happened in your journey that made you this way and how you are?
I think growing up in apartheid Zimbabwe, where Rhodesia at that time, to have been surrounded by injustices of the highest order, to be abused and mistreated in your own homeland by strangers, by foreigners who don't belong there, and feel completely powerless was a very painful thing. But more importantly for me, I was raised by a father who was old enough to remember when our land was taken by the British. People are not aware that, well, some may be. Britain had what they call the Loot Law, where if you were a veteran of the First or Second World War, or just an adventurous Briton, you were guaranteed 2,000 hectares of land. Hectares! So take 2,000 times 2.2. That's almost like 4,400 hectares of land in Zimbabwe, plus any loot from the people. So what they had done was they divide the country into 4 sections, 4 regions. Region 1, good rains, good soil, perfect area to grow and farm and thrive. Region 2, pretty close to Region 1, maybe not as good, but also pretty good. Region 3 was kind of iffy, more good for cattle ranching. Region 4, nobody should live there. Infested with mosquitoes and tsetse flies and all that, and it doesn't rain. If it rains, within 30 minutes, the soil was like sand. You can't even tell that it has rained. So they set out to push black people in Rhodesia at that time from Region 1 and 2 into, if you're lucky, you ended up in Region 3, and then, but they definitely wanted us in Region 4. And so the way they would push people up, if you were a British man who landed in Zimbabwe, they were pushing them to go to Region 1 and Region 2. You were just sent into a particular direction. You put a peg, you get on a horse, and you ride until either you or the horse got tired. You stop and you put your peg. That's day 1. The following day you do the same thing. So it took 4 days to map up your land. And when you're finished, everything in it is yours minus the people. So they'll just go in and tell the people, in this direction, go past this mountain, in this direction, go past this river, your land is now mine. People left with whatever they could carry. My father was a young boy of about 13. He remembers waking up in the morning, and back then Zimbabweans would wear a little flap on the front and back. They didn't wear pants. So the white men with their pants, they called them the men without knees. So you remember seeing men without knees on a horse, touching the huts. The whole village was ablaze. One hut was left standing. It turned out my father's aunt was pregnant and was due to deliver any day. So they had asked for permission for her to stay until she delivered. So permission was granted for the husband, her, and another aunt, a grandmother who was the midwife. And they decided maybe if we leave a child, they'll have mercy on them and not kill them. So they decided to keep my father, who was around 12, 13 years of age. And he remembers having this one little hut left standing. The entire village was just bent down. And every morning, the man without knees would come on a horse wanting to know if my aunt had delivered. Unfortunately for them, it took 3 weeks before she finally delivered. And every morning, the men without knees came. They just knew that was their last day. They were afraid that he was going to shoot them because he threatened to shoot them if she didn't deliver. 3 days after she delivered, I had to walk, go find the rest of the family members. Unfortunately for them, no sooner had they regrouped, here comes another man without knees. He mapped out his land, just keep moving. So that's the story I kept being told by my father. And he would always end with, one of these days, we will get our land back. And I'm so glad that he lived to see us get our land back. When I hear people talk about, oh, Mugabe and how the land was taken, it wasn't fair, and I'm like, give me 5 minutes. Let me tell you how the land was taken from Zimbabwean people. What Mugabe did was very civilized. If you were to live what my father lived through, you'd understand why what Mugabe did was civilized. There were parts of Harare, you go in just maybe 2 blocks into Harare, that's how far we could go. The rest you were not supposed to get to. I remember in high school, I belonged to some Girl Scouts group, and we were invited to go to some white woman's house. We were told to leave, to sit under the tree. It was very hot, I still remember that. But little white girls who were with us, they could go inside, they could cool off, they could drink cold water, and we would be given hot water. I would drink and eat from under the tree. And I would wonder, I said, why is it that these little white girls can go in the house where it's cool, and I gotta sit under the tree? And so the injustices were everywhere. You know, some of the school teachers in my boarding school, we had British teachers, Peace Corps, we had Australian, New Zealanders, Americans. The Americans were the best, I have to tell you. The British they made it very clear, you belong over there and we are over here. And so you knew your boundaries. Thank goodness the American ones were very super nice. I mean, they were the type that would want to come to your village with you and go fetch firewood and fetch water. They were very interested in getting to know who we were. They would invite you to their homes, a teacher inviting you to their house for tea. That was unheard of. But that was during the time that the United States realized that they were missing out on Africa. So this scramble for Africa was happening. So they sent Peace Corps, specifically trained to make friends. And I must say those Peace Corps did a damn good job. So I grew up with a very good and warm, fuzzy feeling about the Americans because of my Peace Corps teachers. But the British, whew, they were terrible. So it is that distinct difference between us and particularly the British and what I grew up being told by my father. I must say I had a lot of resentment and a lot of anger and just wondered, why is it that we have to live like we do in our own land, and these foreigners are coming in and abusing us? You know, we could share, we could live together in harmony, but no, they wanted it all. And we were slaves in our own country. That was very painful.
You mentioned about injustice.
Yes.
Do you still see injustice now on the African continent?
Very much so. I think I'm even acutely aware of it. It's everywhere. One diaspora was visiting with me in Zimbabwe, and he was at a gas station, and there was this white woman smoking at the gas station. So he walked over to her, And he was from Zimbabwe, and he, you know, how we are greeting our elders. And he says in Shona, ma'am, how are you? He's saying it in Shona. And the woman says, I don't understand you. And the guy said, again, I said, how are you in Shona? I don't understand you. And the guy says, well, let me talk to you in a language that you understand. Turn that damn cigarette off. What are you talking about? He said, this is a gas station. Turn off the damn cigarette. You're very rude. Get away from me. Get away from me. He says, are you done? I have all day, if that's what it takes. Turn off the damn cigarette. She proceeded to yell at him and call him all kinds of names. And he stood his ground. He said, I am not leaving until you turn off that cigarette. This is a gas station. You have no business smoking here. You still see it. There are still some who still feel superior to us. Fortunately, it's not many, but there's still a significant number of them who are still that way. I would like to think that we're in a better place as humanity, but unfortunately, there's still a significant number of those who don't look like you and I, who are still quite racist and cannot accept the fact that we are equal as human beings. That, for me, is a sad reality, but that also makes me be more determined to let them know that we are the original people. We are the mothers and fathers of humanity, and that without me, there wouldn't be you. And that's a fact, and there's nothing you can do about it. Take it to the bank.
But one of the things that you preach about is unity. Do you see us unifying for a common goal?
Well, we have to start somewhere. And I'm very hopeful, because when I look at the awakening that's happening now, and it's happening at a very fast pace, while we are not there yet in terms of our ability to work together, our ability to believe in ourselves and in each other, I do believe we are on a trajectory to get there, to the same extent that the awakening is happening so rapidly. I think when it happens, it's going to happen like a light bulb. Bang. Because increasingly, people are becoming aware of the injustices. Quite often, for example, before I started talking about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, the French and what they're doing to West Africa, a lot of people didn't know. But after they heard it, they're like, what? How can this be? And so it awoke something in them. I feel the same feeling is going to happen, where on an individual basis, people are going to say, I've got to do my part. They've got to come to that realization that alone, you cannot steer this ship. It's going to take all of us. And we have to keep preaching as elders to say, this is not about you. Think about your children, your grandchildren, and generations to come. Don't do it for you. Yes, if you can benefit from some of it, wonderful. But think about their future. If you have children, stop, take a look at them. Do you really want to leave this world for them like it is? I would hope the answer is no. So when that fire is burning within you, to say hell to the no. You know, there's no difference between my little girl, who is of color, and a white little girl. They're equal, equally smart. So why should mine grow up in a world that is disadvantaging her for no good reason other than the ability to manufacture the gold, melanin?
Yesterday you mentioned about education, the mindset. How do we improve on that? How do we get to that level of consciousness that we are great, we are powerful?
We have to keep preaching the gospel of truth. Quite often people don't even know. I was shocked at the people that you would have thought they knew. I think yesterday I went to speak to a group of the Africa group at the World Bank. And you know, I spoke like I always do. I talked about the Berlin Conference. I talked about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. I talked about the injustices. And they asked all kinds of questions. It was wonderful. And as I was walking out, 2 African-born economists come to me and said, but Ambassador, we can't keep talking about the Berlin Conference. It's a thing of the past. 2 African economist. I was shocked. I said, I just finished 2 hours. I answered every question, and you missed everything. I said, my sons, as long as we have a country called Togo, a country called Eswatini, a country called Malawi, Berlin Conference is alive and well. It's a policy that they spent 3 months strategizing on how to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. I'm going to repeat that. 3 months of strategizing, or 4 months of strategizing and making sure that they put together a policy to make sure Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. And that policy is still in place today. That is why we still have a country called Malawi, a country that can never survive on its own. That is why we are unable to see that obvious fact to say we cannot survive as these little-bitty African countries. That is why it is difficult for us to say, why can't we just say Africa for the Africans, no passports? It's a simple decision. The leaders just have to table it in their cabinets, done. Why is it so difficult for us to address the obvious? I was talking to the guy who used to work for, he was the ADB president, and he showed me a picture. He said, Ambassador, what do you see? I said, well, I see women who are selling potatoes and their wares. He says, what else do you see? I said, nothing else. He says, you see right there, that's a border. And I said, oh, a border where? He said, a border between 2 African countries. He said, you see the women on that side, when they run out of tomatoes, the people, citizens of that country, cannot cross over and buy tomatoes that they can see because they need a visa. Stupidity of the highest order. At the stroke of a pen, this could be dealt with. It's 2023. We can't seem to get it done. What is wrong with us? Berlin Conference, King Leopold, and his instructions on how to subdue the Africans. The famous Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch letters on how to make a slave, how to condition a black person and make sure that they're forever subservient to the white men to perpetuity. We're still suffering from that. The legacy of slavery. Think of the many black people who are just automatically afraid of white people. Our leadership, you sit them in front of a white person, they start shaking. They're afraid to speak up. Why is that? Thanks to Leopold. Thanks to the legacy of slavery. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. How many people realize they're suffering from the legacy of slavery? They're suffering from colonization, the legacy of colonization. Until you realize that you're sick, how do you go to the doctor? I'm a medical doctor. If you don't come to me and complain about something that's ailing you, I can't help you. Yeah. So a lot of our people are not aware that not only are they sick at home, not only are they sick in a doctor's office, in the ward, in the hospital, they are in the intensive care and they don't even know it. And that is why Africa is not moving forward. Because the people who are on the boardroom table talking to the leaders of this world, they're suffering from the legacy of colonization. They're in the intensive care. So how then do we expect them to defend us and be our voice? They go to those tables mute. And that means 1.4 billion people are also mute. Our leadership must understand that too many of them are suffering from the legacy of slavery. They must have a conversation with the image in the mirror. Why am I afraid of those who don't look like me? How are they better? I was talking to my VP and he reminded me, he said, Ambassador, I found a new realization. He said, I heard about the gene segments. He said, the more gene segments a species has, the more superior, the more intelligent
they are.
That species is. And his realization was that black people have 9 segments, which is the highest gene segment. The second race, I won't mention their color, they don't look like us. Their gene segment is 6. And then 5.
Wow.
Blacks have the
9.
highest gene segment. Clearly more intelligent.
Yeah.
I can't help it, it is the facts. Just like they denied for far too long that life began in Africa. They wanted to make sure we got to prove that black people are inferior. And they went high and low, looked everywhere, turned every rock they could turn, and they still came back to the same place. Life, as we know it, began in Africa. Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
They're the same ones who came up with the gene segment issue. But what they do is they don't want to bring it all out and make sure it's in our history books. But whose fault is that? We're still using the old colonial textbooks that intentionally eliminated facts that would have brought us up more empowered and proud as Africans. They put in there anything to demoralize us, everything to make us feel everything European is better and everything African was bad. Whose problem is it? We get ministers of education who have the freedom and the liberty to change the colonial textbooks, but they don't. Right here in Ghana, my daughter, I was shocked to realize not a single Kwame Nkrumah book is required reading in Ghana school system. Can you believe that? Not one. So who is stupid? With all the intelligence and all the gene segments, we behave in a very stupid way. What are our ministers of education doing? What stops them from changing the educational curriculum in Africa? Nothing, except they're still suffering from the legacy of colonization. Our ministers of finance, everybody knows it. We are paying for frivolous loans that go back, in some cases, to colonization. And yet they go to the World Bank every year, twice. Why aren't you challenging the World Bank to say, World Bank, we're coming together as African ministers of finance, and we're telling you, here is an open letter. We are no longer going to pay for these loans. These loans have been paid for 1,000 times over. Why are we getting 20% interest rate? We have never defaulted on our loans. Greece defaulted on its loans. Let's look at how much Greece is getting. What interest rate is Greece getting? We have never defaulted on our loans. Many African countries have never defaulted on their loans, and yet the rating agencies give them poor ratings so they can justify charging them high interest rates. It was all by design. When the Bretton Woods institutions were created after the European nations had destroyed themselves, like they always do. They're warriors people. All they know is to fight. After the Second World War, they destroyed themselves. So they looked to developing nations to see to it that their own success is going to be based on the failures of developing nations. They put a system in place to steal and rob in broad daylight the developing nations. The majority are in Africa. So yes, the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, their sheer survival is based on the failures of developing nations. They will never put in place a policy to benefit African nations. Now, here comes the kicker. You don't see anyone that doesn't look like you and I going to sell bad policies to African nations. They're sending you, my daughter, and my son over here. And they're training you to go and push these bad policies, policies that are detrimental to the development of African nations. They're the ones that are now being used as instruments of our own self-destruction. The damage is deep. When we get to that point, when we understand that we are part of somebody else's experiment that is won over and over and over, they continue to win. When are we going to wake up and say this insanity, like Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? When is the insanity going to end? When are we going to say enough is enough, stupidity no more? It's up to us.
It is.
We have ministers of trade We know what the World Trade Organization is doing. Switzerland, a country that doesn't have a single acre of cocoa. It is the largest producer of cocoa products.
Yeah.
Swiss coffee, Swiss chocolate, Swiss. You go to hotels all over Africa. Swiss this, Swiss. It's our chocolate right here from Ghana.
That's true.
Why aren't we challenging them? World Trade Organization is giving it a blind eye. They know it.
Yeah.
Look at the teas and coffees out of East Africa. The best.
The best.
They go to Europe, they're renamed. Are you with me?
Yeah.
We know it's happening. Why aren't they go to WTO and say, enough is enough, stop this BS? You wouldn't want it done to your country. Why are you doing it to us? Simple questions that must be asked and that demand answers. But we don't, because we get scared.
Why are we scared?
No.
Why are we scared though?
Why are we scared? Why are we scared? What are we afraid of? We are abused. I sat in meetings where they were yelling at ambassadors. And you said to yourself, what gives? What gives you the right? This minister didn't come thousands of miles to the faraway land to be yelled at, to be demeaned. And we say nothing. When we get to that point, when we are armed with facts and we are empowered and we can stand up and say enough is enough. Now that's when Africa is going to discover her voice. That's when Africa is going to begin to change. And for us to get to that point, we're going to have to keep preaching the gospel of truth and nothing but the truth. The gospel of facts. Truth and facts, two constants that never change. Let's give the world an overdose of our truth. Let's give the world an overdose of our facts. And when we saturate each and every black person, starting with our children, through our educational system, when everybody is full of truth and we have the courage to say, not today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year, not the next decade, not the next century. The time is up. Game is over. Like we would say in Botswana, ikete, that means time up. Done. Get out. If you don't like how we do things in Africa, there's the door. There's always your Europe. Yeah. There's always your Europe. We have our Africa. Leave us alone with our Africa. Go to your Europe. And we're okay with that. When we can stand up and tell them the door, show them the door, and tell them we can, then and only then can Africa change.
Do you think that it's important for African countries to attend UN General Assembly?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Totally useless. Why are they going there for? The largest voting bloc at the United Nations does not have a voice, does not have a seat at the table. They go there to vote on other people's issues, other countries' issues. They don't vote on their own issues. So why are we there? When Africans can come together and say, United Nations Secretary Guterres, we are not coming until we are at the table. We are the largest voting bloc. We are not coming. We should be number 6. We should be the 6th member of the UN Security Council. Short of that, keep your thing. You know, it took a month to put together United Nations. It was for them. The biggest abusers of human rights, Britain, France, and the United States. Yeah. And then, of course, you got Russia and China.
5.
And they're supposed to be the watchdogs for human rights violations. The biggest perpetrators of human rights are the 5 members. Hello. And why haven't the Africans come together and says, enough is enough? We're not coming. This is not for us.
But we've got the African Union.
Yes.
How comes we're not doing something together?
That's a toothless bulldog. That's another entity.
My goodness.
It's a very sad story. You know, when you look at the history of the African Union, our Pan-African fathers, when they met in 1963, the ideas that they had, the vibrance that Africa was, what they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to accomplish. NATO was in full force. Brown envelopes passed. They were divided, the Casablanca group, Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia. They said Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and African Union now. Unfortunately, the Monrovia group, who were the majority, they said, no. Let's kind of go slow on this unity thing. Let's go slow. We've been going slow ever since. If the Kwame Nkrumahs of that time had succeeded, if the Casablanca group had succeeded at accomplishing what they went to Addis Ababa to do, Africa would be in a very different place. They talked about a single currency, a single monetary policy, a single military, a single trade policy. None of that. We only managed to accomplish one 3 years ago, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And even that, we are now handing Africa to the Western world, to the Eastern world, on a silver platter. We don't have the money to compete on those contracts. So where are the contracts going? They're going to go to the Middle Easterners. They're going to go to the Europeans. They're going to go to the Chinese. They're going to go to the Indians.
But we have money on the continent.
If we can just come together and pull our funds together. And I'd like to challenge the diaspora. If we were to take 5 million diaspora, who commit to $100 a month for 5 years, you know how much money that is? And then our own natural resources. Look at what Burkina Faso, rather Niger, has done. To say that I'm going to start with my uranium. And that France, I'm no longer going to sell you my uranium for 80 cents. It's going to be 200 euros per kilo moving forward. Right there, Niger kept almost 300 billion a year that was going to France and funding French education, French healthcare. That alone, one mineral, would completely change the economy of Burkina Faso, of Niger overnight. Now let's take all the other minerals. Burkina Faso is doing it. They started with their gold. When are we going to have leadership with enough balls to do what's right? To do what any other man would do? Dude, you wouldn't want me doing that in your country. Why would you want to do it in my country? Get out. What's right is right. What is fair is fair. We are not asking the world to do what they wouldn't want done unto them. We're simply asking the world to treat Africa fairly. We're simply asking the world to do unto us as they want done unto them.
Do you see in the future a Kwame Nkrumah coming back, a Nelson Mandela? Do you see the youth? Do you see anybody right now? Do you see that we can have those type of people back?
As mothers, as elders, we have to groom them. We raise them with knowledge. We start with the educational system that really tells them the truth. That's what's missing. Our textbooks are pitiful. We still want our children to learn about the petals on a flower. You know? How many legs does a caterpillar have? It's a joke, you know. How long is the Nile River? Okay, fine, you need to know how long it is. But I want to know, what can I do with the Nile River that can make my life better? The farming that can come out of the Nile River, the irrigation systems, the fishing that can come out of the Nile River, the electricity that can come out of the Nile River. Challenge me to think, look at what's around me and how can I use it to make me better, to make my life better. But no, they stop with, how long is the river now? How long is the river Congo? How long is, and what the hell am I going to do with the mileage? Are you with me? It shows up in exam questions.
It's true.
Stupidity of the highest order, man. And when are we going to stop it? And we got these intelligent professors who think they're actually teaching. Come on now. Look at mining. The continent with the most minerals. We don't have many. I think it's only recently that some universities are beginning to teach mining methods. But did you learn about mining when you went to school? No. But white kids who don't have gold mines, they are learning about gold mining in Europe so they could come here and mine what belongs to you. My daughter, let me tell you, it saddens me sometimes. I just sit back and think, What is wrong with us? We know the truth, but we're just not doing the right thing. It's sickening. It's got to change. And if our older people cannot do it, they need to move out of the way. Let the younger people who get it take over. Because this insanity cannot go on. It has to stop.
It definitely has to stop. And I think, for me as a mother of 4, it's like, I wanted my children to be proud of the continent. That's why I moved back home. And it's difficult, it is challenging, you know. And what I found is that Africa has its own system, right? And you just need to kind of adjust. But if we're gonna make it work, we have to be here. If we're not here, then there's gonna be many more years where our children, they won't stay here neither.
But you see, you said the right thing. Africa has its own heartbeat. Yeah. We can't try to transplant what goes on in Europe. Yeah. That's their culture. That's their own heartbeat. We have our own heartbeat that is very vibrant. We have our own appreciation for what is good. Yeah. I have my VP who now lives in Zimbabwe. Yeah. He says his health is better. He has to go out of his way to find non-organic food. Think about that.
It's true.
And yet the opposite is true in the Western world. You gotta pay through the nose for organic food and you gotta go look for it. Is that appreciation for how lucky we are? I open the windows to my bedroom in the morning and there are birds who are singing for me. I can smell the clean, fresh air. When we begin to appreciate that which we have, that we have been taught to think it's not good, to walk to the store, that's healthy. Yeah. I have a problem. I was telling my VP, I said, I have a problem with just getting out of my house and walking. I'm going for a walk. To go where? I said, growing up in Africa, I walked for a purpose. Yeah. I ran for a purpose. You don't see an African, when I grew up, just running like a mad person, chasing the wind. No, if you see an African running, there was a reason to run. There was a certain level of agency. So I have a problem now when I'm in the Western world and people say, I'm going for a walk. To do what? I honestly doubt. I'm telling you right now, I have a problem just going for a walk. Wow. Give me a reason. So when I go for a walk, you better tell me, we are going to that restaurant, we're going to eat, then I know I have a destination with a purpose. Right. Are you with me? I'm with you. That happens in Africa. That's how I grew up. We took it for granted. We didn't know about this going for a walk because I want to lose weight. No. You take those things for granted. Yeah. But look what we did. We were doing our cardios, and it was part of a daily life. There wasn't an on your marks, get set, go. Now you're going to lose weight. No, it was every day. And that's what you get in Africa, that appreciation of nature and how things just happen. When we can teach our children to appreciate how lucky they are when they live in Africa and appreciate the goodness of what we have, those are African children who will really become better leaders of Africa, because they can preach the gospel of truth, they can share with their brothers and sisters who are not privy to what we have, how wonderful and amazing life can be in Africa.
Absolutely. You've been a vocal advocate for ADDI movement and Wakanda City project. Could you explain the vision behind the initiatives and their potential impact on Africa?
Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. The Africa that we want can only be built by us. You can't expect those who have put us in the conditions that we are in to pull us out of them. Okay. As long as we're going to them to beg to help us, they will always build the Africa that they want. Sure. The Africa that's going to serve their purpose. So as ADDI, we are on a mission to share with as many black people as possible that our inheritance is in Africa. That those who don't deserve what Africa has have been siphoning our inheritance for centuries. The Africa that we want can only be built by us. And so ADDI is on a mission to tell every able black person that can hear, that can see the truth about our beloved continent, the exploitation that's taking place, and how it affects each and every one of us. But also remind them that the only way to take back our Africa is through unity. And for us to be able to unite, it's easier when we're armed with knowledge.
Okay.
So preaching the gospel of truth, saying it like it is, empowering the people, and letting them understand the systems that have been put in place to keep us where they want us to be. That is ADDI's mission, because with knowledge, we know we can fight this war, and we will fight to win. Absolutely.
So how do people join ADDI? How do we get involved in ADDI?
Go to ouraddi.org, ouraddi.org. You can join as a general member, no fee, just join. Or you can be a paid member. We are saying $1 a day for Africa. It's a total of $365 a year. Should you wish to help pull some funds together. But if you can't, that's okay too.
Okay. Mommy, do you ever see us getting our reparation back?
Yes. The Jews got their reparations. The Japanese who fought the Americans, they got their reparations. All other nationalities that were, races that were harmed, received reparations, so why not us? It's like we're not human. When we are harmed, we're not human. We don't deserve reparations. No, we deserve reparations, and we're going to fight like hell. Even if we don't see those reparations during my lifetime, you bet I'm going to leave this world having done my part in telling every single one of the children that you're owed. And you're going to fight like hell to get what belongs to you. We will get the reparations, no matter how long it's going to take. Mark my word, and we will fight them to the bitter end.
Fantastic. So last question, the diaspora. We talk about the diaspora, we talk about the 6th region. Are we ready as diasporans to move back home and develop the continent?
Some are, but we don't have a critical mass yet.
Okay.
And that critical mass, we don't have it because out of sheer ignorance. I was on a radio program one time, and I was talking about going home to Africa, and that I was saying every person of African descent is an African, and Africa is home. I cannot tell you how many times I get African Americans, Afro-Caribbean calling, particularly African Americans. They'll say, "But Ambassador, we're different." And to which I would say, exactly how are you different? Let's go home to Ghana. You're walking alongside my son.
Yep.
Unless you open your mouth,
nobody knows.
Nobody knows whether you're from America or you're from Ghana. When you cross the street, they're not going to say, an American crossed the street. They see 2 black men crossing the street. So how are you different? And then you can see the wheels turning, because you were told that you're different. And you never actually stop to say, how am I different? Because we're programmed to be spoon-fed, and we don't ask questions. So the issue then becomes, how do we create that critical mass that understand that the Jews are Jewish, no matter where they are? Yep. They're Jewish first. That the German Americans, they're proud of being German Americans, Irish Americans.
Sure.
You know, Italian Americans, Chinese Americans, Indian Americans. Why is it that we are not proud of being African Americans? Because again, we were told, why do you want to be part of a diseased and dying continent? You're different. Wherein lies the problem? That's stupidity again. How are you different? If everybody else is proud of their anchor, which is their countries of origin, why aren't you proud of your anchor? You're like a ship without an anchor. The wind blows that way, there you go. The wind blows that way, there you go. At what point are we going to realize that the black men living outside Africa, they're confused, black man and woman, confused because they're not anchored. But once they get anchored and accept Africa as home, their whole demeanor changes. Their thinking process changes. There is something healing and liberating by simply embracing Africa as home. We must let them know that. We must let them experience. So I'm also on a mission to let descendants of the formerly enslaved understand that you are loved by the Africans, that you've been lied to, that Africa doesn't want you. Far from the truth.
Absolutely.
Africa loves her children. Absolutely. You are loved. Come home to Africa. Experience what real love is all about. Fantastic. So yes, to the descendants of the formerly enslaved, I say, welcome home.
Welcome
to
home.
Africa.
Welcome home. What is your African dream?
My African dream is when children of Africa around the globe and at home in Africa can come together and realize that while we may not like each other as individuals, like sisters fighting as brothers fighting, but there comes a point that we must come together and speak with one voice for the sheer survival of who we are, for the purposes of taking back our Africa and reclaiming that which belongs to us. That insanity of divide and conquer, the rule of divide and conquer, must be defeated once and for all. And for us to destroy the rule of divide and conquer is calling for that unity of purpose among us. So I ask all of you, people of African descent in Africa and outside Africa, to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror and ask yourself, who are you? And what do you dislike Africa? You have been miseducated. You have been misinformed. To what extent are you going to say enough is enough? And you are going to do your part to heal thyself from the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. Because it is only when we heal from those two diseases that true change can come to Africa, because you will be truly liberated. The choice is yours. Are you going to be the most dangerous thing for Africa today? The most dangerous human being for Africa today is an African, and by African I mean all people of African descent, is an African who's suffering from the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. Are you ready to heal thyself so you can embark on a journey of true healing, when you can then stand up and defend your turf? The choice is yours.
The choice is yours, and I'm sure that you have enjoyed this conversation. It is sparking something in your brain right now. You are encouraged, you're gingered up. Make sure you join our ADDI.org and register today to be part of this amazing